Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Leo Training Podcast. My guest this morning is author Phil White. Phil is an Emmy-nominated writer and the co-author of Game Changer with Fergus Connolly, Unplugged with Dr. Andy Galpin and Brian Mackenzie, and the forthcoming books Waterman 2.0 with Dr. Kelly Starrett and the 17-Hour Fast with Dr. Frank Merritt. He is also a frequent contributor to the Inertia and Sup the Mag. You can start a conversation with him at www.philwhitebooks.com, on Facebook at Phil White Books, and on Twitter or Instagram at Phil White Books. Phil, good morning. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Really looking forward to our conversation, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and thanks so much for taking the time today to talk to me.
Hey, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. We've got a great subject to discuss, the book that you co-authored with Brian Mackenzie and Dr. Andy Galpin, titled Unplugged: Evolve from Technology to Upgrade Your Fitness, Performance, and Consciousness. So, Phil, there's a ton of different themes within this book, but let's kind of start with, I guess the first question is what or who decided that they wanted to write this book? Were you spearheading that effort, or was Brian?
No, it was both of us. Brian and I got introduced through our mutual friend, Dr. Kelly Starrett, and just over a couple of years have been talking about what we might do on a book, on the book front. So we'd done a couple of magazine pieces, like the Inertia, and I think maybe we did one for Sup the Mag as well. And just really, Brian and I have pretty similar personalities and just enjoy each other's company. And so we thought, well, it would be a natural fit to do something long form and just conversations around fitness technology. And Brian is an autodidact. He's somebody that teaches himself a lot of things, and he also has this white belt mentality where even if it's something he knows a lot about, so for example, he was CrossFit Endurance for the best part of a decade. And even in that, when he was around elite endurance athletes or coaches, he's just like this massive receptor and is always just trying to learn. And so with fitness technology, he's tested just about every gizmo that has come out in the last couple of years of note, everything from the more medical grade kind of pulse oximeters to more consumer level technology that you would see on people's wrists. And he's learned some stuff about himself through that. And so we got talking, and then I went back to England for my dad's 70th, and on the way back I read this great book by the British journalist Richard Asquith called Feet in the Clouds, which is about the fell running movement. And if anyone listening doesn't know what fell running is, it's basically like trail running, but being England muddier. And Asquith's point is that it's really one of the last, if not the last, true amateur sport in the UK. And it's partly immersion journalism, in the Great Plimpton tradition. So he is a runner and wanted to get back into it, but switch it up a little bit from roads. And so he goes and runs up and down some big bloody hills with people. And in this sport, the prize money is, a £20 gift card to your local pub or something, or a 4-pack of Guinness or something like that. So they just do it for the love of it. And then contrast that with me reading Dave Eggers' The Circle. And so we had these polar opposites of this dystopia with Eggers' book, and then Asquith kind of detailing this great first-person narrative, the joys of being out on a muddy Saturday morning somewhere random in the UK, running up and down a big hill just for the sheer joy of it. And so there was really kind of a dissonance there that we wanted to explore. And then also Brian had been doing quite a bit of work with Andy Galpin. And so once we talked to Andy about this, he was all over coming in and bringing that kind of, Andy's in an interesting position that he's a muscle physiologist at Cal State Fullerton. So if you pick up the new issue of Men's Health, which has, I think, Mark Wahlberg on the cover, there's a 5-page spread where a Men's Health reporter goes and embeds with Andy in his lab for a few days, and a great feature on his day-to-day work there. But Andy's really passionate about bringing science to the masses. And so he's able to do a great job of putting things in layman's terms. And for more on that, you could see his appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. And just does a really great job of having enough content to be of use for the expert, but yet, as I said, being able to put stuff in layman's terms so that it's applicable for the rest of us who aren't PhDs. And so, yeah, really just the three of us coming together. And the way that the co-authoring typically works on my end is we come up with a table of contents and then we just interview around it. And then from there, we send research articles back and forth, or, oh, you should read this chapter of this book, or what have you. And so between the three of us, it was just a real passion project and just ignited something in all of us. And I think we wrote it beginning to end in about 9 weeks, which really just speaks to the fact that it wasn't rushed, but we just really, really enjoyed talking to each other about it and geeking out on all this stuff. And hopefully that comes across on the page.
It does. And that's pretty incredible. 9 weeks from start to finish, getting it written and everything. Very cool. Very cool. So the first question that I have for you, and this is kind of, one of the things that, before the first chapter in the prologue, you all do a beautiful job of setting the reader up for this. And so why is overdependence on fitness technology a problem?
Okay, yeah, that's a big question, sir. So I think that there are a couple of things going on here. So one of the books that was very influential on us, and people are going to think that Adam Alter's paying me to mention this because I do in pretty much every interview like this I do, but Adam Alter's book, Irresistible, he goes into how technology is designed to be addictive, and that kind of gamification word that wasn't a word a few years ago, but is now, and I think that one of the most interesting / concerning stats he brings up is that the average person in America, and it's probably true in other countries as well, looks at and or touches their phone every 6.5 minutes. And if you don't think that that's a sign of addiction, well, I would argue that it is. And so then we add in this layer on top of just bog standard consumer technology of a device that can be strapped to your wrist 24 hours a day and purports to track everything from your sleep to your heart rate and heart rate variability to your steps to your cadence and your stride rate and everything else. And then if we're talking about 6.5 minutes, say, for the phone, well, what about if you've got this thing on your wrist? So really, it's conceivable to say, and I think justifiable to say, that you could be looking at some kind of device every couple of minutes. Now, in a profession like mine, where you're writing, and the kind of flow state that Stephen Kotler talks about in The Rise of Superman, and Jamie Wheel and Stephen explore some more of those altered states in their book Stealing Fire, which is also excellent. They talk about one of the required triggers for flow is deep focus. And I can't think of anything that would take you out of deep focus or just prevent you from ever getting into it more than this thing that's on your wrist that isn't just telling you the time and is really just providing this constant stream of information. And I also think that we found some studies that show that looking at such a device on your wrist, and again, I'm trying to be careful not to name any names because we're not trying to bash any one company at all, or indeed say the technology is bad. It's neutral, like any kind of technology. It's just a question of how we use it and the boundaries we put around it. But even looking at a device like that changes your walking gait. So these studies that show the difference in how you walk when you're looking at a device, well, what if you then add some speed into the equation with running? Or what if you add some load into the equation with lifting weights? Well, suddenly what you've done is you've kind of short-circuited this proprioception loop. And what I mean by that is your awareness of yourself in three-dimensional space as it relates to your own body and your environment, and also other people around you. And in doing so, we're trying to compensate with that with these big, thick shoes on running soles, that buffer these bad and altered mechanics, where in taking ourselves out of ourselves, really, as a bad way and not a very literary way to say it, but we're not paying attention to these movement faults, which over time, Kelly Starrett has this, what he calls the I3 model. And the point we usually come in is the last of these three I's, which is injury. Like we chase pain and solving pain, and we don't really do anything about movement problems until pain or injury shows up. But the first two steps in this are incomplete mechanics, and then incidents, which are that little tweak in your hamstring you feel one day, or that little, niggle in your foot, or whatever it might be. And really, I think that this overdependence on fitness technology is preventing us from noticing these incomplete mechanics and doing something about it, i.e. being able to self-correct. And it's also setting us up for injury in the long run. And it's making us even less aware of the world than we already are. And a lot of us live lives with our noses 2 inches in front of a screen. And when that comes to you moving, again, it can be a problem if you're moving slowly, but if you're moving quickly and or with load, biomechanically, you're kind of creating a perfect storm here, potentially, if you're looking down at this thing on your wrist, or you're only paying attention to this, in quotes, coach in your ear that's being piped in, telling you to speed up or slow down. And really, you're losing all sense of yourself in an athletic context.
Yeah, I think you brought up such a huge point in the numbing of body awareness and sort of the dilution of how we're moving in space. And when you are any type of athlete, but especially, a younger one, an adolescent, you're really working on a lot of skill development. It's so important to, one, not only have that awareness and mental focus and be truly present in the moment in the activity that you're doing, but getting all of this feedback from the environment that you're in. And, to the point that you just made with the wearable technology and our smartphones, it's like this constant background noise, this chatter that's going on that really robs that environment from happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Phil, that was a fantastic in-depth look at kind of all the tenets of this massive problem that we're dealing with currently. So, kind of building upon that. So, from an individual perspective, why is it important for us to kind of self-regulate our training intensity or training sessions versus using a fitness technology such as a Fitbit or a heart rate monitor or any other type of wearable? Why would we want to kind of go the other way and sort of not have anything connected to our body? Sure.
And I think as a caveat to that, I would say that things that, map your run, for example, when you look at the data later, can be very helpful. And that it also can be very helpful if you have a coach who is prescribing certain, so example in rowing, right? If you knew that you had to do, the old 8 times 500 meters with 3 minutes and 30 seconds rest, the Wolverine pan or the Pete pan, something like that. Well, obviously you're going to use a piece of technology on your rowing machine, which is your monitor there, to look at that. And that, you want all your reps to be under 138 or your 500 meter times to be under this if you're doing longer sessions, whatever it might be. So there are use cases for it, and also we think that the technology can be used to collect data and again just review it later so that you're fully in the moment, and that way you have something that's objective, measurable, and repeatable. but you're not, it's about boundaries. And I also think it's about intentionality. So you're not just collecting data on everything, but if your coach has said, okay, we need to look at this kind of power output with watts, or again, split times with this, then okay, that's fine. But really be more intentional about that. Try to focus in on one or two metrics, and if possible, pay minimum to no attention during, unless again, you're having to look at that monitor, whatever it might be for split times on the rowing machine or what have you. And, that's something that obviously can be necessary in certain scenarios. But I think that to your point, Andy did a study with his colleagues at Cal State Fullerton a couple of years ago where they had these, I believe they were cross-country runners come in and run. I think it was a middle distance, something like 7 or 8K, and at a certain rate of perceived exertion. And then they had them come back in a couple of days later, so they were pretty fully recovered. And the only guidance they were given was, okay, just repeat that distance on the treadmill with a similar level of exertion. And what they were surprised to find was that all of those athletes were plus or minus 2 seconds of their initial effort. So I think that we with all this technology, we can give ourselves a lot less credit than we deserve for our ability to self-monitor and self-calibrate, as studies like that show. And what people have found is that rate of perceived exertion, which on the simplest form is just giving it a number 1, which would be you walk into the mailbox to get the mail, or 10, which would be Usain Bolt, may God rest his track and field soul, doing his thing on the track, and then everything in between. And they found that this is RPE is just as effective as heart rate monitoring in accurately determining where you need to be from an intensity standpoint. And again, this just shows that we really underestimate how we were designed to be and the kind of instincts that are built into us. And a story that we tell in the book is one of Laird Hamilton, who obviously everyone knows from surfing giant waves and pioneering SUP and foil surfing and this kind of thing. But in the winter, sometimes he'll go with his family and friends and they'll snowboard. And he told us this story when we asked Laird, can you tell us a story that people wouldn't have heard outside of, riding giants and some of the major documentaries where people probably know those big wave stories? And he said, sure. And it's a snowboarding story. And so they're on the mountain and his friend is about to go down this run. And Laird just feels that something is wrong. It's like a disturbance in the Force almost, the Last Jedi. And he instinctively reaches out and grabs his friend's jacket collar and yanks him back. And literally a couple of seconds later, this giant wall of snow just comes through and this avalanche rips down the mountain and would have buried his friend. And the reason for this is just Laird is out in nature every day, sometimes in big waves, sometimes in flatter conditions on his paddleboard, but he's always outdoors. And we find people like Leif Whitaker, the mountaineer that we also interviewed for the book, and Laird and others, Kai Lenny, are very highly attuned to the natural environment and almost have this sixth sense, as silly as that might sound, that a lot of us have cut off because we just move from one indoor environment to the next. We don't walk anywhere anymore. And if we are somewhere outdoors, we put in our headphones because we've told ourselves that that's what we need to motivate when we're moving. And so, our head's down, or we got our tunes going. And again, if music motivates you, and we know there is research to say that music reduces the rate of perceived exertion, so i.e. makes your workout seem easier, well, great, do what you need to do. But maybe think about, if you ran 5 days a week, maybe once or twice a week, just go in without the headphones, and other than that, doing what you usually do, and just see what else you might notice. Is it smoke rising from a chimney, this time of year? The side of that, is it bird song in the trees overhead? These little details. And I think you can find that you will reattune yourself to your surroundings pretty quick. Again, it's not saying you should always go unplugged. This is not an anti-technology book, but what it is a boundaries book. And it's just saying we need to just re-examine this stuff, make sure that it is being additive and not subtractive, and then really just using it to cue, to inform, and to calibrate rather than it being this be-all and end-all taskmaster, which for some of us it's become.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that you just touched on there that was really good, and you didn't say it explicitly, but you were talking a lot about, being in nature and immersing yourself. And we'll get into that more later. But this idea that when you are not so connected, you're really developing some very good natural intuition of your environment, of your surroundings. Like you're learning to really feel not only how you're moving when you're doing a certain physical activity, but what's going on in the environment around you. And that ties right back into the story with Laird, but also, kind of some of the earlier points you made about movement mechanics, or in incidents where you might have a flare up in a hamstring, or maybe something's tweaked one day, like you said. So bringing that back and having that that proprioceptive awareness of your environment is so huge. It just makes us such better movers, better athletes.
Yeah, and also putting yourself in environments where you have no choice but to focus. Because if Laird is out on a wave, or any surfer is out on any wave, like if I learn to shortboard surf, because currently all I've done is flat water on my paddleboard, I'm going to need to focus in 6-inch waves or 2 foot waves, let alone, go in triple overhead or something crazy on the North Shore or something like that, Laird and those guys do, and bigger at Jaws. And Brian Mackenzie says another reason that he likes jiu-jitsu is because it forces you to be fully present, or you're going to get choked out or armbarred into submission. And so there's no choice in certain sports but to be fully present, right? Or a Formula One driver isn't, probably looking down at his device on his wrist every few seconds, because he's going to hit a wall at 200 miles an hour, and that's not going to end well. And so I think that maybe sometimes just, choosing a new sport that maybe requires full attention, or even a game of tennis, that constant rhythm back and forth. You don't have the opportunity to look down and see what the app connected to the sensor on your racket is telling you. That's data in those sports that maybe an experienced coach is capable of interpreting and you can use later, but at the time, you've got to be fully present in that game because of the back and forth nature of it. So sometimes it's just about challenging yourself and putting yourself in those environments where you have no choice but to be fully present.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where all the growth happens. So you've done a phenomenal job kind of talking about the self-regulation aspect. So now let's kind of get really in the weeds here and talk about, on the flip side, what's the cost to us as an individual of being plugged in all the time? And I think it'd be good to kind of break these up into, maybe some buckets or categories. And so what's the cost, physically, mentally, socially, maybe spiritually, psychologically? So all those different areas, if you could maybe give one or two for each one and kind of talk about how these are detrimental.
Sure. Well, one we could start with is psychological. So a gentleman we featured in the book, one of Andy's good friends, is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Lenny Wiersma. And Lenny works with USA Swimming, works with some of the most successful water sports programs in college, D1 college, and athletes across the world. And one of the just basic psychology things that he reminded us of is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is you're the kind of person at your job that does not need to be micromanaged. You just go out and you do a good job because the satisfaction of doing a good job is enough. Well, someone that needs intrinsic motivation is somebody that either it's the material rewards of the job, money, bonuses, whatever, or possibly a micromanaging boss looking over your shoulder and making you do a good job, right? And so we see this in athletics, and you've probably had teammates that are on both ends of the spectrum and everywhere in between, just as I have. And really, Lenny said that there's a danger in relying on a device because it is only an extrinsic motivator. And again, to go back to Adam Alter's book, Irresistible, he talks about how this isn't just the visual display of the numbers themselves on these devices, but it's also the audible dings, like they're trying to get into other senses. So, you meet your goal, ding, it will make a little noise at you. It'll give you more visual reinforcement with little smiley faces, or you can earn badges, on your apps and this kind of thing. And so really the designers of this software and hardware are getting really smart in knowing that the brain gets a little hit of dopamine every time that happens. And actually the expectation of it is stronger than the reward, and conditioning us. It's almost like B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning experiments back in the day. And so that is one of the reasons that we believe that up to 50% of, in quotes, smart fitness technology users stop using those devices within 6 months of buying them. Because at some point, the extrinsic motivation runs out, or the dopamine hit isn't big enough anymore, like a junkie, that just burns himself out. And that at some point, intrinsic motivation that comes from within, or indeed just if you need accountability, just working out with a friend or hiring a coach or whatever it might be, has been shown to be more powerful than the extrinsic motivation you get from using one of these devices. So you might want to think about the long-term strategy there. And I think physically we've covered that pretty well in terms of the lack of proprioception and some of the challenges there. I guess just living your entire world in a close field. So right now I'm, a foot and a half away from my computer, much as you are. And if I had a smartwatch, in quotes, which I don't, I actually bought an analog watch for myself for Christmas, just to make a little change so I don't have to pull out my phone if I know vaguely I've got another meeting, in quotes, later, but I'm not quite sure what time it is. That's really, I found I was annoying myself by doing that when I was with a friend, say for coffee, or out on a lunch date with my wife while the kids were in school. So yeah, just went back to an analog watch that only tells the time, and I'm starting to see some benefits from that already. But I think if we live our lives in this near field, we're forgetting to look into the middle distance or even the far distance, and we're starting to see some visual problems develop on a systemic level here, a society-wide level, where people, if all you're zooming in on is something that's in the palm of your hand or in your pocket all day, or on your wrist or in front of you, like your tablet or your work computer, that's the problem just from the visual system standpoint. And then we know that our eyes are only part of that, right? That there are then impacts on the brain. And then there's another, Andy posted this great kind of before after split screen view of a friend of his, I believe is in Illinois somewhere, a neuroscientist. And the picture on the left is the brain after 20 minutes of seated meditation. And then the picture on the right is the same brain after 20 minutes of an unplugged walk in nature. And the meditation brain, as you might expect, there's quite a few green areas, there's yellow, there's a few oranges and reds, but the brain after taking a walk is just lit up. It's an awful lot of oranges and reds, which show high brain activity in this case. So we're starting to see that there are some neuroscience benefits to getting outside and doing what the Japanese have a word, and forgive me for not knowing exactly what it is, but the term basically is translated as forest bathing. And so that doesn't mean that they're going and jumping in a pool in the forest somewhere, but it means immersing themselves to the point that they've almost been washed by the forest. And so the Japanese are interesting in that it's this great contrast between super high technology in the cities like Tokyo, but then even within that, they're very serious about their green space. They're very serious about ceremonies like tea ceremonies. And then they're also very serious about getting some nature exposure as a daily discipline or practice. And so, again, there's some neuroscience benefits and evidence around this deep experience that you're only going to get. And then just the fact of walking itself. Our cities from the 1950s onwards, with the rise of suburbia, we went the opposite way to the old English villages, or villages anywhere really, which were planned around being able to walk to a good pub, frankly. And there was a church and there was a village green, and they were basically built for community. Now you're starting to see some master plan communities that are trying to mimic this, which is a good trend the last 10 years or so. But suburbia, you have to drive everywhere, okay? And so really it's just trying to find ways, even if you do live in a suburban environment, to just get out and walk more, even if that's through a park or something like that. And if you can add in a little bit of nature, all the better. But it's really, you can start to see some big benefits from making small changes. So again, if you're connected to a device during your training 5 days a week, maybe start by going without it one of those days. Or maybe give yourself the challenge of doing a 12 or 24-hour complete technology fast once a week. See what the results are, and if you're starting to see some benefits. And so really, I think it's not about making this whole scale change where we say all technology is bad. Let's gather around this bonfire of fitness trackers or anything like that. But it's really starting to make some small changes, which will have some acute benefits in the moment, but then might have some surprising and welcome long-term accumulated benefits that change your baseline from a cognitive standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and maybe even, as you mentioned, from a spiritual standpoint of just learning some more self-discipline and self-control with some of these things.
For sure. Yeah, and one other one that comes to mind too, and reminds me of another interview I did recently with Michael Ramphone, a strength and conditioning coach in Connecticut, and socially, right? And so, I spend a lot of my day during the week coaching adolescents, boys and girls of various age groups in sports, and getting them to, make eye contact and talk and communicate with one another, I think is becoming sort of almost in some ways a little bit of a lost skill, because, when you go on a job interview, you need to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand and make eye contact. And, first impressions are very important. And getting out of, using technology and developing those, soft skills are very, very important for success in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can think of one example where up until I buggered my ankle up last spring, a couple of buddies and I were the old men playing pickup ball with some high school kids. And at the end of one of them, the lady would, live in a small town, so everything closes early. Sure, on the downsides, but overall, it's definitely a net plus with the walkability and the natural environment. Anyway, so the lady that runs the front desk would usually kick us out at 9, and if we begged and pleaded, we could maybe get away with 9:10, 9:15, something like that. So we finished running some, I think we were playing 4-on-4, full court, a couple of guys left. So, okay, a couple of guys are sucking wind a little bit, but they almost took like an Instagram break. The high schoolers, they went over to the bleachers and they sat down in these crappy, hunched over, C-spine shapes on Instagram, and my buddy and I, Roger, was trying to implore them to run it back one more. We've probably got time to maybe play to 20 or something like that if we get going here before they kick us out. And it was as if their phone literally sucked them into another dimension. They weren't even capable of hearing these old bearded guys telling them, you need to get going here. And some of them were high school athletes. They were on the track team, and another kid was big into skiing, in the winter, and they were decent athletes. So I fail to believe that they were more tired than these two old guys that were standing here begging him to get one more game in before we get kicked out. But yeah, both the two things I noticed were like this portal to another dimension that they got sucked down as soon as the phones came out. And then also positionally, what happened to their spine to collapse them in on themselves, that made me think that if it's a good time to be an orthopedic surgeon now, it's going to be an even better time in 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, they go right into the human cashew shape.
Yeah, exactly. And that's previously a shape that you would see in a poor little old lady crossing the road with her granddaughter and on a walker, where her spine is so bent that there's no hope, or very little hope of her ever straightening up again. I mean, you start to wonder if with the effect of these devices and sitting all day, if we're going to start to see this in 40 and 50-year-olds in the next generation, you know?
Oh, I'm sure we will. Yeah, that's very interesting story that you shared there with the sort of the immediate change in body posture, and then also kind of their social interaction, getting going into another dimension. So let's shift gears a little bit. So we've done a great job. We talked about, the wearables, the problems, how it's affecting us, and sort of all of these different categories. Now kind of let's start to shift gears and focus on, getting into some solutions, let's say. So the first one, let's talk about re-immersing ourselves into nature. One, why that's important, and then get into some of the benefits that it's going to have in some of those categories that we just touched upon.
Sure. So, I mean, I think we touched a little bit on the neuroscience benefits, and also what we found in our research is that there are people that are outside for even a little bit, a minimum effective dose of, say, 15, 20 minutes a day, report lower levels of perceived overall stress and anxiety. When their inflammation markers have been studied, we've even seen that they're a lot lower, and we've even seen that looking at pictures of nature starts to make changes in blood pressure. So you can imagine the factoring effect of if you actually get out in it, and then secondarily get out in it and are fully attentive to your experience. And really, it's just about it. It's not, as the hacking movement might purport, that we can become these superhumans. It isn't about that. It's about getting back to a normal functional baseline of what we came from. And we came from the natural world, and we are of the natural world. But we rarely pay any attention to it unless your job involves you, going out and running Avi patrol on a mountain, or, being a lifeguard or something like this, or a park ranger, or somebody who is forcibly immersed in it every day. And so I think that really it's just about, again, minimum effective dose. So really, as part of, the conclusion of the book, we say just kind of, if we were going to set an unplugged challenge, it would be just to get outside 15 to 20 minutes a day with no technology. And you don't have to be, going hard or fast, although obviously you could. And if you want to go for longer, I think you're going to find after a while that you crave it. And if for some reason your day gets busy and it gets crowded out, that you're going to miss it. But starting to create this daily practice and just doing it every day, and just seeing what the effects are and how you become resensitized, how you're more aware of how your body's moving through time and space, how you're more aware of even other people, to your point, socially, with maybe you'll bump into an old friend that you wouldn't have noticed if you were heads down. Maybe you'll meet a new friend. I mean, I guess I kind of romanticize village life, being from a small town in England and now living in a small town in Colorado, but just maybe building in a little more time. So, for example, my commute, I'm very blessed that it's a 30-minute walk to a local coffee shop that involves me going through our little downtown, such as it is, and through the trees and along a lake. But yesterday I ran into my friend Michael, who's kind of keeps the grounds at the little inn down the hill, and we talked for 20 minutes, and he wants to get back into playing tennis. And so we talked about when we might be able to do that when I'm done with this, editing this next manuscript in a couple of weeks. And, if I had had my headphones in or were heads down, maybe I wouldn't have noticed him tending the plants over there in one corner of the grounds and wouldn't have gone over to him. But it was partly about just building it in a little more time for that walk. So if I do run into somebody and we have a bit of a chat, and you can tell them in this conversation that I like to talk and I like a good conversation, that's okay. Because I think another thing with technology is we get into this Henry Ford model of in quotes efficiency and productivity, where everything on the assembly line of our lives has to be done as quickly as possible. And the hacking movement tells us that we need to cram in more into our day. Well, what would happen if we looked at someone like Carl Honore that wrote the book In Praise of Slowness? And Carl advocates for adding in more gaps in our day, and then not filling them with anything consciously, so that they can naturally be filled by conversations or by contemplation and reflection, or if you're a spiritual person, by prayer or study of your sacred text, and if you're not, maybe meditation or something like that. And so really just trying to, it's about boundaries, it's about reordering priorities, and it's about just making a few little changes, such as getting out for a walk, say 15 to 20 minutes a day with no technology, and just seeing what benefits that may have for you.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. And that was a great story you shared too. Just bumping into your friend on the way down to the coffee shop. It actually reminds me a ton of a seminar I attended this past spring with Mark Allen and Brant Secunda, Fit Soul, Fit Body. And so it was a lot of looking at kind of the physical aspects of things, as well as the spiritual and the mental and social. And a lot of the activities we did throughout the weekend were kind of, having, sitting in a circle, at times like beating drums, but then going out and doing specific activities in nature. Some of it might be like grounding, so taking your feet off and feeling the earth underneath your feet. We did a fire ceremony on Saturday evening. So just sort of, nothing complicated, very, very simple sort of in nature, but the effect over that weekend was transformative, to say the least. Walked away from that weekend. My fiance and I did sort of like a 3-day sample size and tracked our caloric intake on an app, and just to get a baseline of how we were eating. And while we were eating really good whole foods, our macronutrient proportions were completely out of whack, and we were getting about 50% of like healthy fats a day. And, weighed myself, and I was like 211 pounds, which is like the heaviest I had been. Maybe one time earlier in my life it was heavier. But anyway, fast forward 6 months later, and between right around 181, 182 now. So I lost 30 pounds in 6 months.
Well done.
Yeah. And so just, reconnecting with nature and focusing on some of the simple things and getting back outside. And it was great. Did, a lot of longer runs in those 6 months, and would go outside and just kind of take in the senses. And, in Kansas City, running along the creek down near the plaza by the water, so sort of my concrete jungle, so to speak. But it was very therapeutic and fun. So the benefits of re-immersing yourself in nature are immense.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a good word, fun, and heaven forbid that we actually do some activities that are joyous and spontaneous, and if you have kids like I do, you just have to observe them and see that, whether it's at a playground, where there was some technology present most recently, because they were doing the Dude Perfect imitation thing, and doing some trick shots, but while hanging off of various pieces of equipment at terrifying angles and heights, and jumping off of slides, and just crazy stuff that kids do. But when we go on a walk, they're not super challenging hikes, because again, it doesn't need to be, and they're 8 and 10, so we don't need to go summit Everest together or anything. But they just spontaneously pick up rocks and throw them. And I taught them the joys of tipping logs, which I remember from the old World's Strongest Man contest, the Fingal's Fingers, where they have a bloody big telegraph pole or something, and you have to get underneath it at one end and tip it over. But just some log tipping, and we included a couple of pictures of this in the book, because it's one of our favorite things to do outside. But that kind of thing is really fun to do. And it doesn't, or even just, if we take the wiffle ball and bat up into the trees and say, okay, point to some trees, first base, second base, third base, home, whatever it might be. You don't have to have your kids go out and do a formal interval workout at a track or in a gym to get them moving. You just go up there, and when they're tired of playing, they'll say, okay, can we go home now? And that's usually when they're worn out, and maybe you are too. And they've sprinted around between those trees and got, and it's unstable ground. There's fallen pine needles, and there's branches to jump over or move out of the way for the next time. And And so you're having to interact in an environment way more than you would in a formal workout setting. But you're also having fun, and you're out there just playing a spontaneous game. Or for us growing up, it was, if you went to a park and for some reason they had taken the goalposts down for maintenance or something like that, so you couldn't play soccer with goalposts, well, two of you would take off your sweaters at one end, two of you at the other end. There are your goalposts, and you just go at it and kick the ball around. Or we see it, in videos of street soccer in Brazil, and they're pretty good at soccer, and they don't have these glowing, well-manicured, multi-million-dollar facilities and, all these formalized games going on 24 hours a day, it seems like, at the weekends. And again, that's not to bash youth soccer, and it's great that those facilities are available in the West, but again, it doesn't have to be that way. You hear about certain NBA players that were too poor to have a hoop growing up, so they just improvised and made a ball and a hoop out of whatever. Well, again, that joyous spontaneity seemed to work out pretty well, as it instilled a passion in them that they were able to then parlay into a pro career. And so, we get too caught up in this technology arms race of having to get the latest bike that weighs 12 grams less than our buddy's bike, or for me, lusting after the latest SUP paddle because it might make me a little 1% faster or whatever it might be. And it's like, my goodness, how about we just actually get back to basics and just live a little and do things that we enjoy and challenge ourselves by trying something new that we may fail at for a while, just to see if we like it. And if it sticks, well, maybe you want to keep doing it. And if it doesn't, start something else. When did it become this grind of having to pay constant attention to watts and to split times and everything else? Because frankly, most of us aren't training to win an Olympics or a world championships. And so maybe we should stop acting like it and just get back to having some fun.
I love that. That might be the quote of the interview so far right there. So building on that, why is it important for us to engineer discomfort into our life?
Life as it's meant to be is discomfort. It's I heard a pastor say once that life is problems, and it's just a question of how you choose to navigate them, which is very true. And I think that sometimes with technology, we go from one air-conditioned environment to another, from our cars to our office buildings, to our cars, to our house, to the mall, to our house. And in doing so, research has shown that if we're never exposed to temperature extremes, that we shut off certain mechanisms in our body. And there are these things called cold shock proteins, and then also conversely heat shock proteins. And what these do is everything from triggering autophagy, which is a fancy way of saying clearing out dead cells and reconverting dying cell matter into new cells, to neurogenesis in the brain, creating new cells, to regulating heart function and brain function and everything in between. And Dr. Rhonda Patrick has done some of these studies and also interpreted some studies that have come out of Scandinavia that finds that there's got to be some cutoff and some kind of minimum effective dose here, I suppose. But these studies done on middle-aged men that found the incidence of all-cause mortality, I think, is around 40% lower. And their blood pressure is way better, and their heart function is way better. And even with degenerative brain conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, that there's a much lower risk among those who use a combination of saunas and cold plunges regularly. And again, I was surprised to find, because I thought, well, if you just did that once or twice a week, you probably get what you need. But actually, those that did it 5 to 7 times a week, there was still starting to see some gains on those that did it less often. And so there are cultures around the world, Scandinavia, again, Japan, and then also some ancient cultures where, using this thermic cycling between heat and cold was effective. And we don't need a lab to be able to tell us the efficacy of practices like that, or some of the work that Brian's doing now with Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford on their art of breath clinics and around state change, and how the we're starting to see that breathing is really the remote control for the brain and the nervous system, which is something that our friend Casper van der Meulen said. And so we're starting to see that some of these practices that have endured over centuries or millennia have endured simply because of efficacy. They just work. And so people pass them down through the oral tradition and through immersion to the next generation because they're effective, and the same in martial arts and these kind of things. And so really, I think that starting to make old medicine new is a way, if you're seeking a way to enhance, in quotes, your life, and really what all that means is just getting back to being human, you need to engineer some discomfort. Another one in the forthcoming book, that shameless plug alert, is now up for pre-order, that I wrote with Dr. Frank Merritt, who's an ER physician by day down in Florida, the 17-hour fast. There are, particularly within the endurance community, we find people that are basically hooked on sugar because they've been conditioned to believe that they need a goo or a gel or an energy tab every 20 to 30 minutes. And their liver becomes deconditioned, really. And so it becomes over-reliant on glucose. And so we start to see a learned helplessness from an energy production standpoint where, the hangry thing, you haven't eaten for a while, so you get real cranky. Well, everyone has that to a degree. But if you're out for a 30-minute hike and you're saying, hey, did someone bring a granola bar? I'm starting to crash. Well, you've conditioned yourself to be dependent on simple sugars. And this isn't an anti-carb thing or a paleo thing, because I think we can go too far that way. But really, again, just saying, okay, once a week, try fasting for 17 hours and see what some of the benefits may be. And maybe you start with 12 hours, maybe just stop. We've got to stop this thing where we're only moving from one air-conditioned environment to another, where we're going to the pantry or to the fridge every 30 minutes to an hour to top up. Or even, you see it in weightlifting. You're told, oh, well, you need, X grams of protein per pound of body weight. So guys are just hammering way more protein than their body can process, and some of the ill effects of that. And so, yeah, even within the sporting community and even among some elite athletes, we're looking at these new shoes to try to get a guy to run a marathon in under 2 hours because, this shoe might make him 2% more efficient. Well, how about we start to look at his hip flexion and extension, because maybe he's missing 30 to 40% there. Let's look at his nutrition strategy, or maybe is he drinking enough water? And really looking at some of these bigger things. But then, like I said, just engineering a little discomfort. Try fasting for, 12 to 17 hours once a week. See how you feel. And the first time, the answer is going to be awful. We'll do it again, stick with it next week, and then the next week, and it's going to start to feel a little bit better. And then you don't need to intermittently fast every day, but you'll find that you're going to reset to a baseline. And really, that's all we're talking about today with putting in a bit more discomfort or not being reliant on technology 24/7. We're just saying, look, hit a reset button and try to get back to baseline normal function, and set some better boundaries. I mean, that's what all of this is about.
Yeah, and I like some of the suggestions you mentioned regarding the fasting. I do that a couple times a week. So any of the days that I'm not exercising pretty intensively, I usually don't. I'll have at that point, it's like brunch, a very late breakfast. The only thing I'll have in the morning is, water and some coffee, but I don't eat a meal or any food. And I've actually, not only do I feel better, but I've actually feel like I'm much more, my mental clarity is better and productivity is higher as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've actually seen that there's a lady in London, again, bad anecdote is I can't remember the name, but if you look up the TED Talk, you can probably find it. So I think she's at University College London or somewhere like that. And she talks about some of the activities that can stimulate neurogenesis. So literally the growth of new brain cells, which until a few years ago, people didn't think was possible, but now apparently is. And walking is one of them. A little dark chocolate, surprisingly, is another. But fasting / calorie restriction intermittently is another one. And so that was pretty fascinating to me in researching the 17-hour fast, that I found this TED Talk and then went and read some of the research that this lady is referencing, and she links to most of it. And I and really just finding that you can actually create new brain cells by occasionally being in a fasted state. I mean, very few people are talking about that. So that was exciting to us to stumble across this thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm curious, do you know why the dark chocolate helps with neurogenesis?
I mean, not being a neuroscientist, if you have Andrew Huberman on, he could probably speak to that. But yeah, there's just something in it. And again, I'm not a PhD, and I just try to learn from these experts like Brian and Andy and those that Dr. Kelly Starrett and Frank Merritt and others that know a lot more. But yeah, on the research side, I didn't look into the mechanism because that was more, oh crap, like fasting / calorie restriction can do this, and then that sent me off down a rabbit hole to find other similar studies and similar presentations more on the fasting side. But yeah, there's got to be some kind of compound in there, and maybe it's the same ones that we usually hear about when we hear of the benefits of dark chocolate. But yeah, forgive me for not knowing more on that. But yeah, I guess I should look into it.
No, that's cool. I just I like those 3 recommendations. All simple things that anybody could kind of turn around and do, tomorrow or today even. So great stuff.
And not like I need an excuse to eat more dark chocolate, frankly.
Oh, trust me too. I think we ended up purchasing like a bulk order from this. They make dark chocolates the company's called Askamosi in Missouri, and it's just some of the best dark chocolate I've ever had. It's like 70 to 80%. So we got 12 to 15 bars, and we haven't eaten them all in one sitting, but we still have probably more than 8 to 10 left, but it's just very good, high quality. And it's amazing the difference when you have something like that, and then, around the holidays or Halloween, you have a piece of like a Snickers bar or something, and the amount of it just tastes so artificial now. It's unbelievable. It's the only way I can describe it.
I mean, part of what with the 17-hour fast, that what this came out of is Dr. Frank Merritt, his best friend Jason, was diagnosed with incurable brain cancer and was given 6 months to live. And this hits really close to home for us because my father-in-law, John, who I never knew, who died about a year and a half before my wife and I met, we really feel like he could have benefited from some of the methodologies that Frank and a multidisciplinary team of endocrinologists, basically every ologist you can think of at a hospital, they came together and put together this set of protocols for this friend, Jason. And he not only outlived that 6 months, but was able to have 2 children with his wife that they said, well, with the chemo, you're not going to be able to do this. And was able to practice law almost up until the end and ended up living 7 years. And so really, this book came out of the fasting part of that protocol. And again, a minimum effective dose. 17 hours might seem like a gimmicky number, but it isn't. It's been very carefully dialed in through years of research from Frank and his colleagues in the medical profession. And also parentheses, we're not trying to sell you a line of supplements like a lot of people that write fasting books seem to be doing these days. And so even with people that are sick, like every one of us knows someone that has been touched by cancer or is probably suffering from the effects of being overweight or obese, or is struggling with diet-related issues, with their liver or kidneys or their heart or whatever it might be. And so I think that, it comes out of this place of a pure motivation to kind of learn what helped extend Jason's life and improve his quality of life, and we really believe could have helped my father-in-law as well. And, for people that are even somebody who's just overweight, and we know that is, the biggest factor in all-cause mortality and pretty much all-cause major disease, to maybe just make a couple of simple changes, and maybe this 17-hour fast is just kind of an on-ramp again to put food back in its proper place in our life, rather than this false god that it's become for many of us, and also just to start making some lifestyle changes around that and using it as almost kind of a gateway to just start setting some better boundaries, really, and start to reprioritize. Because I think even in myself, I recognize that, if I'm thinking about going out with some friends for a good curry, which is a very British thing to do, and frankly, the only good British food there is to eat. If you ever go to the UK, it's I can become fixated on this, a few days out, and then obviously you really enjoy it, and part of it's just that social time with friends and family that we talked about a bit earlier. But and again, as you mentioned, around the holidays, this people just go hog wild and assume that they'll rejoin the gym in January, but we know 86% of people do not stick to New Year's resolutions. And so there's just these cycles that we seem to have got ourselves into, where we've elevated food to something that it was never meant to be. And so again, like you talked about your experience at that one retreat, or just creating a simple daily practice, where you change a few things. Maybe you just deliberately try not to snack as often, or maybe you start by just doing this 17-hour fast once a week and see where it leads. So again, it's really just the motivation is to not for us to finger point or to say we're better than anyone else, or to say we know it all, or even to cling to a particular system. That you shouldn't eat that. That's not paleo, bro. Which JP the comedian JP Sears does a really great job in his video of lampooning certain extremes within foodie communities around these kind of things. But I think really what he's doing and we're trying to do is say, look, let's hit a reset button here. Let's try to pursue a little more common sense and just restore a bit more balance to our lives. And hopefully if that kind of message moves the needle for one person and they're able to improve their health, or it's, again, someone they know is sick and they're able to fast a little bit, which we know that certain types of cancer, that that mutation feeds on glucose. So maybe they cut out refined sugar, and that helps that person either overcome that disease or have a bit more quality of life in the time they have left. Then we'll feel like we did our job with any of this stuff.
Yeah, right on. Absolutely. Providing some tools for everybody to use, which is a great segue into the last two questions. So these will be kind of short and sweet and a little bit fun. So based on doing your research for this book and then writing the book, and then kind of now you have this in the back of your mind as you kind of move throughout the day. So what are three sort of negative behaviors that you've seen or observed or experienced from people using technology? And then on the flip side, what would be your top three recommendations that people could use to unplug?
Negative behaviors. I'll start with myself, that kind of biblical idea of being the chief of sinners, in your own private domain. So for a long time, I had conditioned myself to believe that, and this is an example, again, close to your heart, I'm sure, with your own background, that I could only get through a hard interval workout if I had a pumping playlist in my ears, and, it would really rev me up to have that music going, and then also accompanying that I had to have a protein bar or a couple of handfuls of almonds and an apple or a banana 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour before that session. Otherwise, oh my goodness, I'm going to crash and I'm not going to be able to make it through. And really, Brian's great at he says, if all your friends are all yes men and all they ever do is affirm you, then they're not real friends. And so he can be pretty candidly brutal in a good way at calling collaborators out on stuff. And so, this kind of thing is like, well, are you sure that that's true, or is that just a construct? And so starting to realize, okay, well, maybe today I'm going to not snack before that workout, and then I'm going to see what the results are. Oh, I was able to actually do that just as well. And even mentally, just thinking, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to be fine. And this was even before I got into, working with Dr. Frank Merritt and researching the 17-hour fast. Just, it was a mental construct, this fallacy that I created, that I needed, again, that pumping playlist, which I took away. And then that snacking close to, and then obviously on the other end of that, there's you've got to get your 20 to 30 grams of protein 20 to 30 minutes after your workout, or you're going to be somehow messing yourself up, or you're not going to be able to recover from a muscle standpoint or whatever. And again, okay, there's some evidence around some of that stuff, and you can go out and do your own research. But if the scenario is after you're done with your workout and you don't eat for a couple of hours, again, unless you're competing for the Olympics and these tiny marginal gains are that important, I think you're going to be okay. But we tell ourselves that we're not going to be. So there's one. And then number two, I guess, would just be that basketball example I gave earlier, where these kids went from being present and engaged and having fun in this game to getting on their Instagram because those 10 followers are going to die if they don't get constant updates from these kids. And, you know, it changed their posture into a horrible collapsed shape. They just became non-responsive and just, it almost completely changed them physically and mentally. And then the third was just being out on a run one time. And, you know, again, we live in this idyllic little town here in Colorado, and we're very lucky to do that. But, you know, on the trail, I like to listen to the little stream burbling below. You know, sometimes you might see an eagle overhead or another bird of prey, and you'll certainly hear bird song. You might see an elk or, you know, even a bear. We had a black bear get into our garage twice this past season before they started hibernating, and the kids got to see it from afar during the day, and mother bear and two cubs. And that one day I just happened to notice because I saw movement at the corner of my eye when I was working in my office, and just because I'm used to being outside more and seeing animal movement, just like, oh, I wonder. And, you know, initially I thought, well, that's going to be an elk or a deer, but no, it was a mother bear and two cubs wandering down our hillside. And so, yeah, kids get to see that and feel pretty blessed that we were able to see that. But anyway, back to this encounter I had on the trail. So I'm running along, you know, and or plodding, frankly. I'm not much of a runner. I was plodding along. And I encounter this guy, and, you know, initially you think, oh, well, he's probably going to move. He doesn't move, and he's going faster than I am, younger guy, probably in his 20s. And he's got his headphones in. He's got one of those old style kind of little straps on your bicep that will hold your old iPod or whatever you might have. And he's also looking, so he's got his headphones in, that's device one. He's looking down at this device on his wrist, you know, presumably checking pace or heart rate every maybe 15, 20 seconds. So I see him coming from quite a way away, think, all right, you know, he's going to yield the way. There's a bit more room on that one side. And he sure doesn't. And he keeps coming, and we almost collide because just at the last minute, he looks up, sees me, takes corrective action, and just kind of steps around me. But I almost had this head-on collision with another runner, and there's a lot of bikers that use that trail. And heaven forbid if that had been someone on a mountain bike, I would have lost that one and lost it pretty badly. So it's just like he took himself completely out of himself. He's not paying attention to other people, so there was a social effect. And then environmentally, he's completely cut off from hearing the birds, seeing an elk or a bear or a mountain lion or whatever you might happen to see up here in the mountains. And so really, was that worth it? Well, maybe to him it was, if he was able to keep his split time for the run. It sure wasn't to me, because it gave me that moment of panic, and again, could have ended badly, an injury for both of us. And again, finally, I'm just thankful he wasn't on a bike, because he would have just run me down.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm glad you came out okay on the other end of that one, and it wasn't worse for the wear. But that's just it's just listening to that. It's so interesting to hear sort of how it's not only mentally, it's like physically they're moving, but they're just not there. Like somebody's just not present. They're miles away from where they physically are, and like all I can think of is it sounds like, you know, you're going to hear a story sooner or later of some very terrible accident happening. And actually it's even some of these Instagram posts, I think ESPN had them on this week, where the kid was like running, tried to jump up the side of the wall and grab, like, I think it was the top pole that extends from the wall into the basketball backboard. And he ended up slipping off of that. He like grabbed the bottom one, and then when he went for the higher one, he lost his handhold and like fell 12 feet from the top and landed on his back. And, you know, presumably he had a friend that was, you know, videotaping him, I guess, for some type of social media. And it's just, it's scary.
Scary. For sure. It is. And I think also that it's not just about other people around you or potential injury, but do you want to live a richer existence? You know, and again, it comes back to quality of life. So if you were able to rate an experience 9 or 10 out of 10, well, obviously you're going to want that rather than one that's diminished and you would rank a 4 or 5, whether that's eating a meal with friends and family or it's a workout or a race or whatever. And so you want ways to kind of be the only way to have those rich experiences to be fully there. And I think even Larry King said recently in an interview with Cal Fussman as a guest host stepping in for Tim Ferriss on his podcast, probably a few months ago now, Cal asked him, Larry, with all this technology, what are we losing? And he said intimacy. And he talked about how he feels like his biggest tip or trick he would give anyone for an interview is just be fully there. Like if somebody's willing to give you their time for an interview, or you could even extend this to a friend, if someone's willing to meet you for coffee and be there and give their time to you, or even this interview, my phone switched off, the home phone, because we were old school, I guess, is unplugged, and I shut down my web browser. So, we're doing this on Skype. So in this way, a technology, Skype is good because it's connecting us across state lines. But I'm trying to be fully present with you, and I can tell from our conversation, the thoughtful questions that you've asked, that you're being fully present too. But that's this is a rich experience, and I'm going to come away and my wife will probably say, how did it go? And I'll say, it was great, it was awesome, I can't believe you thought to ask me this. And seriously, like, I'm jazzed about that thing. Or with my co-authors, like, that's what gets me going, is those rich conversations that you come away and your brain is on fire. But to have those, again, it requires focus, and it requires being fully present and immersed. And again, kind of coming back to those flow states with Stephen Kotler. And so to your point with the 3 tips for being, for doing better with all this stuff. Well, 1, just practice being fully present more often, whatever that means to you. 2, try to get outdoors 15 to 20 minutes a day. And then 3, try to engineer a little discomfort, either by, it doesn't have to be anything crazy with ice baths and saunas, although it could be. Just try doing a hot bath followed by a 60 second cold shower, because you'll get most of the benefits. Or try going a little bit longer sometimes between meals, or going into a workout not being fully in a fed state, but in more of a fasted state. Or maybe after your workout, waiting 2 to 3 hours to eat, even though initially you've conditioned yourself to believe, oh, I've got to do this. So yeah, those would just be some simple tips, just to, again, have more first-rate 9 or 10 out of 10 experiences, rather than these diminished kind of shell experiences that maybe you would rate a 4 or 5 if you were honestly assessing them.
That was great. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Phil, for sharing those experiences and those helpful tips. That takes us through all the topics and questions that we had for the interview. So again, thank you so much for taking the time, being fully present, and coming on and discussing your work and the book Unplugged. It was a very good conversation, and I look forward to sharing this interview with everyone, and hopefully they can turn around and use some of this knowledge and apply it into their own life.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And again, for asking such thoughtful questions.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.